definition of civil engineering, which we had to change in 21st century, keeping with the sustainability. Then third will be sustainable development. Then fourth will be broad issues of sustainable development. And finally, conclusion. See, our Mother Earth is facing lots of environmental problems, as you know, like global warming, ozone layer depletion, etc. Now, all these adversely affect mankind and others on this planet. The Almighty Allah gifted us a planet with ideal livable environment, natural resources, etc., etc. Since there is no such a planet in this universe, hence we are left with no other option but to ensure its sustainability. Then we know environmental degradation of this planet, particularly over the recent 5 decades, have gone up at an alarming rate, and this cannot be allowed to continue indefinitely. A landmark study in 1974 by this interdisciplinary research group at MIT, USA, illustrated several global scenarios that may occur depending on range of possible technological, economical, and social assumptions. You see, all the possible scenarios predicted. Number one, collapse of natural resources, followed by collapse of human population and decreased quality of life. Now, recent 30 years update reconfirms key conclusions of the above study and illustrates severe challenges facing global society in future, the signs of which are becoming visible in the form of global warming, rising of sea levels, climate change, etc., as you will be seeing in the following slides. Now see, in 1880, when we look towards the sky, we could see blue sky. Now in 2015, this picture shows blue lines are rarely seen now. So this shows the extent of degradation to our environment. And what is causing that? See the industries, how much emission of harmful gases to our atmosphere. Then see this picture, built up area where we have gone for construction, the land has become barren and sky has become red. And the green area still adjacent to this, you can still see the emission of carbon dioxide is less, so we can still see green sky. But if we continue to go for built environment at random, then we may have to see only red sky. Now, we have to see now from civil engineering point of view, what is role of civil engineering profession to ensure sustainability of this planet? This is serious impact of construction industry on environment sustainability in qualitative form will be seen in next slide. But before that, it is no secret that the construction industry being the largest consumer of natural resources, thus having significant impact on the environment through its major activities, right from manufacturing of construction materials, followed by its transportation to the site, then construction activities at site, and finally, operational energy consumption of buildings. And it will be worth noting here, production of 1 ton of cement, because now we go mainly for concrete construction, so for that we need cement. 1 ton of cement produces 1 ton of carbon dioxide also. Now see the qualitative activities under this civil engineering profession. We have to manufacture the raw material, cement, steel, then we need high temperatures, so a lot of fuel is being burned, then that emits carbon dioxide, so that is on the extreme left. Then our manufacturing plants are far from the site of construction, then we have to transport, then transport also, you know that it also contributes. Then for mega structures, we need mechanized system for construction activities, so that also burns fuel, and then we have again emission of carbon dioxide. Then once we have completed, and then you see cluster of buildings, then you need central heating, air conditioning, etc. So then you need energy consumption, so that again emits carbon dioxide. So if you see right from beginning to the end, And then during use of buildings, we are only emitting harmful gases to the atmosphere. Now, in quantitative terms, same thing. This construction industry contributes 44.6% of this carbon dioxide. Now, this was recorded in 2013. Now, you see it may have crossed now 50%. Then industrial contribution 21% and transportation, these vehicles, etc., 34.3%. Now you see construction industry is one of the biggest contributor of harmful gases to our atmosphere. Now this graph shows the manufacturing of cement and steel. These are the primary materials for construction purpose, especially for mega structures. You see graph was going very at mild slope in the beginning, but during 19th century and then 20th century, it is steeply going. Dotted line shows manufacturing of steel and dark line shows manufacturing of cement. Now you see both during 20th century has gone up. Now let us come to second part, which is role of civil engineering profession towards sustainable development. Prior to 20th century, the definition of civil engineering was the art and science of directing the great sources of energy and power in nature for the use and convenience of mankind through uncontrolled construction boom globally without caring about environmental degradation. This definition of civil engineering led to development of conventional design and construction practices with material choice mainly confined to primary materials like concrete and steel. Both these materials are detrimental to our ecosystem and have resulted in alarming unsustainable construction globally, particularly in recent 5 decades, as seen in following slides. Now see only concrete or steel, mega structures, then metropolitan cities coming up, now smart cities, new trend. So all what we are doing, go on building and without caring about atmosphere. You see all concrete structures here. Now, definition of civil engineering in 21st century. It is not just constructing buildings, roads, bridges. It is now civil engineers are the custodians of both built and natural environment. We don't have to only care about the built environment, go on constructing. We have to see its impact on our natural environment. A paradigm rational shift in the very definition of civil engineering, which demonstrates the fundamental change in the relationship between civil engineers and the natural world, and has set forth basis for development of sustainable design and construction practices. Now, two examples are here. One is Bahrain World Trade Center. Now, you see this is a tall building there, and they have wind turbines within the building. So part of the energy is generated within the building. Then another building in Singapore, this is a hospital building. Again, material construction practice is environment friendly. You see, considering the above factors, that how much civil engineering industry or construction industry is contributing to global degradation, this environmental degradation, it is clear that the profession of civil engineering can play a central role in addressing most of the environmental issues. Therefore, should have provided global leadership on this in recent decades. Civil and structural engineers face significant challenges in the 21st century, and among them, global environment challenges must be a priority for the profession. Therefore, on a planet with finite natural resources and an ever-growing built environment that means massive construction of infrastructure, civil structural engineers must consider the environmental, economic, and social sustainability of design, construction practices, and construction materials. Such a development can be rightly named as sustainable development. You see, this is a cutting of Institution of Civil Engineers UK. Sustainable development is now absolutely central to civil engineering, and we must organize ourselves accordingly. Now, what are the sustainable development and goals of it? The Prime Minister of Norway Mr. Brundtland in 1987 defined the sustainable development as meeting the needs of the present generation without compromising the ability of future generations to meet the needs. Sustainability as a set of environmental, economic and social conditions in which all members of the society has the capacity and opportunity to maintain and improve its quality of life without degrading the quantity, quality, or the availability of natural, economic, and social resources for future generations. So sustainable development as application of these resources to enhance the safety, welfare, and quality of life for all of society. Now, this is list of 17 goals to transform our world with regard to sustainable development. No poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, so on. So these are named here, and these are United Nations defined goals of sustainable development. And you see, this again shows cycle. Our raw material, when we extract it, it should be environment friendly. Then when we process it, again environment friendly. Keep on seeing the other processes, then finally it should be recyclable. We should choose such materials which are recyclable so that there is no pollution, soil pollution, water pollution, air pollution. Then coming to civil engineering, sustainable design is the philosophy of designing physical objectives, that means buildings and services, to comply with the principles of social, economic, and ecological sustainability. Reduce the negative impact on the environment and health, human health, thus improving the performance during a building's life cycle. Careful consideration is given to water, energy, building materials, and solid waste. Principles of sustainable design. Generating energy from sun. We are not pollution. Improving indoor air quality in the buildings. Using the land responsibly. Creating high performance and moisture resistant houses. Wisely using the earth's natural resources, because these resources have a limit. We cannot go on using them or exploiting them without caring for future generations. Now, this is a green building concept, but green building is not just adding a green outlook. The definition of green building is buildings that are designed, built, renovated, operated, and decommissioned at the end of its lifespan in an ecological and resource efficient manner to protect occupant health, improve employee productivity, use energy, water, and other resources more efficiently, and reduce the overall impact on the environment. Now, how to judge whether a building is green building or not? So leadership in energy and environmental design, they have developed some grading. It is issuing certificates like this. 40 to 49 pointers based on their criteria, they are issued a certificate on. Then those who cross 49, 50 to 59, they are awarded silver grade. And then 60 to 79 gold, and 80 to 110 pointers platinum. Now, this is a picture how to make your building green. You see, I will be reading it because highlighting some of the features. If we start from extreme left at the top, rainwater harvesting system on the roof can collect water to be used to flush toilets. Then center solar panels can heat bath water. The next, wind turbines on the roof can be used to generate electricity. So within the building, we should not be relying on outside energy for operational purposes. We should try to use the building itself to meet its needs so that we are not dependent on outside energy resources. So this is how we should make our trends, that whenever we have mega structures, how to plan it that we are not polluting the atmosphere. Now, sustainable construction is the third. Definition: the optimization of construction activities in a way that does not have harmful effects on resources, surroundings, and living ecosystem. It is a way of minimizing harmful environmental impacts of construction projects. On the other hand, conventional construction, which is in vogue, involves activities like use of building material from various sources, use of machineries, demolition of existing structures, use of green fields, cutting down of trees, etc., which can impact environment in one or more ways. Now, it also includes wastes from demolition of buildings and structures. Aim should be eliminate, avoid producing construction waste in the first place. Now, if it is unavoidable, reduce, at least minimize the amount of waste you produce. Then recycle it. Reuse the construction waste in other works. Recover, recycle what you can only after you have reused it. Dispose of what is left in a responsible way. Then use of sustainable building materials. Recycled content, natural and renewable, locally available so that we don't have to transport it and it will be cheaper also, durable, energy efficient, and affordability. Now, this is the last part, broad issues of sustainability for civil engineers. Now, global environmental impact due to construction industry. What makes construction industry among the major contributors to global environmental impact? The increased trends in steel and concrete consumption during recent 5 decades illustrates the growing environmental impact of construction industry. After water, concrete is the most widely used substance on earth, the third largest carbon dioxide emitter in the world. Up to 2.8 billion tons surpassed by China and US alone, because they are the major contributors. Concrete has thus become the most destructive material on earth. Manufacturing of other primary construction material through iron and steel industry is the world's biggest energy consuming industry. In view of above facts, our blue and green world is becoming grayer by the second. Every second is contributing to grayer part of it. As the effect of climate change and other environmental issues become more and more pronounced, it is extremely important than ever find efficient ways to protect the environment and save the humanity. Now, global environmental impact also includes unprecedented consumption of cement and steel in recent 5 decades. Now, let us see why we need such a huge quantity of consumption of cement and steel. The reason of such uncontrolled consumption of cement and steel in recent 5 decades is capitalism, which teaches us the more wealth we have, the more we want at whatever cost. So this has driven countries world over to build unlimited high quality infrastructure without caring about the environment. Creation of such civil infrastructure not only becomes a necessity in all the competitive countries, but a challenge to civil engineering professionals also. With the prevailing conventional design practice, together with dependence on two primary construction materials, steel and concrete, the infrastructure developed may fulfill the demand, but such design and construction practice completely ignore the environmental concerns. This unsustainable construction boom world over during the last 5 decades, using unsustainable construction materials and conventional design methods, has been responsible for ever-growing demand for the most destructive materials, resulting in alarming environmental degradation. Now, this graph I am again showing that during last 5 decades has been more alarming and is still continuing. Now, what we should go for? Use alternative materials instead of cement and steel. Structural designers in the world over depend on two primary materials, steel and concrete. Unfortunately, both of these materials responsible for very high carbon emissions. Designers should explore alternative materials with lower environmental impact. Now we have two good examples. In Japan, they had some exhibition So it was a temporary structure. So what they did in 2000, they made a structure of cardboard tubes instead of steel or concrete structure, which were recycled at the end of the exposition. Once that exhibition was over, they recycled it. The architects worked closely with the engineering firm to develop and implement the structural system composed of cardboard. In addition to the creative use of structural cardboard, the pavilion was supported by simple temporary foundation made of wood and sand, which could be easily removed at the end of the exhibition, particularly for buildings with a short lifespan. Designers should explore alternative materials which achieve the engineering objectives of efficiency and economics while reducing the environmental impact of construction. Now, solution is use alternative materials. Structural designers in the world over. So this is same. And third aspect is education. To produce the future leaders of structural engineering, educators must be visionary. As with other academic fields, engineering education should promote critical thinking, where assumptions are questioned and students must solve open-ended problems with many possible solutions. We must go well beyond conventional structural analysis, and we must teach design as well as broader the thinking required to address the challenges of sustainable design, including the social and economical impacts of structural design. Professional engineering associations are now requiring sustainable development principles in education. In the United Kingdom, the Royal Academy of Engineering has appointed visiting professors of sustainable development at 21 engineering departments in the last 1 decade. The Royal Academy of Engineering believes that the needs of the sustainable development should become embedded in the thought process and methodologies of all practicing engineers and engineering designers. Engineering education can improve the perception of engineering while creating leaders in the realization of a more sustainable built environment in 21st century. Now, some conclusions. As design engineers, we have a responsibility to offer the best possible solutions to the society. Future engineers must develop a more environment-friendly engineering design, construction materials, and practices, which is commonly referred to as sustainable design. Achieving more sustainable design will require concerted efforts from practitioners, researchers, educators, and concerned administrative officials. You see, when we issue building permissions, they should see whether the material being used, whether the other aspects of building are environment friendly or non-friendly. So they should not allow any such building to come up which will contribute more and more harmful gases to the atmosphere. What is sustainable engineering design and construction practice? Such a design and construction practices which reduce material consumption in order to preserve natural resources for future generations, improves the quality of life for people. Unfortunately, both design and construction practices during the 20th century has miserably failed to address the global environmental impact of the construction industry. Now, we should strive to do better in the 21st century. Okay, thanks.
Any question from the audience? Mike, दे दीजिए.
Mike, yeah.
You are audible. If you can stand up and introduce yourself.
I'm from the Department of Environmental Sciences.
Okay.
I'm from 7th semester basically. So your presentation was very nice. It was up to the mark. But what I found was there was no women in parliament. Maybe I am not a feminist as such.
No, you are right. Yes, because you see, I am a professional from civil engineering point of view. I am not against empowering women. So, but it is not up to me. So, I as a professional civil engineer, so I will do my bit. But you
Everyone
have.
must cooperate in this endeavor.
Okay.
Any technical, this is a subject of very significant importance, especially for us, because we have seen over the years new type of construction coming up, especially in Kashmir. We had the old conventional construction system in Kashmir, but we are now witnessing a quite different construction structure. So it's in that way significantly important for us. Let us have some kind of interaction with the specialist.
Okay.
Because he has suggested we should, all of us should cooperate. In what way shall we cooperate? What are actually the sustainable measures that are being suggested by the professionals? That is the subject probably we can discuss upon.
Yes, dear students, the session is open for interaction, and I always tell you that ask is a simple three-letter word, but it can actually work magic for you. It can work wonders for you. So kindly interact and ask whatever question. No question is stupid ever. To come forward, and because it's a very sensitive topic, environmentally conscious topic, and it is a topic of the future. Future generations will have to deal with issues like this, so the question answer session is on. Kindly go up for the interactions till we have our next speaker here.
Many of you are the students from environmental science,
Yes.
right? So this subject is quite relevant to your subject. So no question?
I have
Yes,
Ah,
yes, please.
So I thought the woman involved in possible the can include the woman involved in engineering some because there is a less representation of women in the NITL. There is a possibility of behind it. There is so much representation of the girls in the environment sector. So environmental science in the engineering field. So what is the possibility there? So it can be included with the environment. Just for the engineering.
see, if you see the admission process, it is only you have to qualify the entrance exam.
But there is less representation of the girls in that. So why? What is the
So
possibility?
that it is based on open merit. You see, our admission process is based on open merit. So, and it is transparent. Once you have your grade, then you know where you are placed. Okay, so admission process, if more female students can qualify, then we will have more female students, provided they reach to that level.
My question is that why they are not qualified? Because we are all taking the education from all why they are not qualified?
Generally, female students shine, and we have seen that among the toppers, more female students than male. So it is up to them to see why. Maybe the number is little more male students than female students, and that would be one of the reasons.
Since it is a generic type of question, it's not a question related to the technicalities which the professor talked about. It's a general type of question. Some 20 years back, engineering was not considered to be an area of concern, an area of attraction for females. It's a fact of the matter. And that's why, if you see the admission process to especially medical sciences, MBBS and others, prior to the introduction of NEET examination, we used to have 50% of the seats in the medical institutions earmarked exclusively for females, but not in the engineering field, because it was not considered to be much attractive field for female, because these engineers have to work on the ground. So it was not, in whatever the reason, and traditionally it was given to understand by the peers that mathematics and physics are not the cups of tea for females. It's a fact of the matter. You may or you may not agree. We as parents would desist from encouraging our female students to take up mathematics, saying that it's a hard core subject. It's a dry subject. Therefore, dry subject is not actually made for the female students. It's a fact of the matter. So that could be one of the reasons that the more number of female students would not go for engineering areas. But the situation, the scenario has over the years changed. Now we see in the engineering institutions a good number of female students seeking admission in engineering, especially when it is soft engineering like computers, electronics, communication, IT. If you find the data, if you collect the data from across the country, in these areas of engineering, you find more number of female students compared to male. If you take up IT, if you go for computers, within this, our own union territory also, we have two engineering colleges in addition to the NIT. We have two engineering, government engineering colleges. And in those government engineering colleges, in software areas of engineering, you see a good number of female students seeking their admission. But now things have over the years changed. People are now, female students are now opting for even the civil engineering, which was considered to be very hard area of engineering, as civil engineers have to work on the field. But now we find a very good number of female students going for civil engineering. Things are gradually changing. You are talking about why we don't have a good number of engineering students pursuing engineering with females. But female, you must also notice that our own students, female students, are now ready and they are going for admission to other NITs and the other engineering institutions. I mean, across the borders, in other states, even in other countries. So the situation over the years has started changing and gradually it will reach to a level where you will find in engineering areas also 50% or sometimes more than 50% female students seeking admission. As we find now in our own general education, you must be observing that in general education, you have more number of now female students seeking admission in our colleges. For example, you are the students of SP College, right? Do you have the female students here in SP College? You have the female students. But SP College, you must be observing the fact and knowing the fact that SP College was exclusively a boys' institution, an institution which was actually meant for male students. And now the policy of the admission has changed because of the fact we find more number of girl students seeking admission in the graduate level course or postgraduate level course, and therefore the doors of these institutions have also been opened. You find in your higher education sector, here in the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir, you find more than 50% students, female students in various colleges. There are some exclusive female institutions, and in addition, all other institutions which were actually the boys' institutions, male institutions, they have been converted into co-educational institutions with this intention that we provide more and more opportunities to female students to seek admission for higher education. So things are changing, and things have already changed, are changing. Gradually, more and more changes shall be witnessed by all of us, and we will find definitely a good number of female students seeking admission for engineering, including the hardcore engineering like civil engineering. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other question?
I think we should be, all of us girls over here particularly, should be very thankful to our parents who believe in us,
Yes, yes.
who are showing the good interest that their daughters should get the good education at par with their brothers.
Yes.
I think that's a big
Yes,
thing with
yes.
us. Policies are already there.
So we have changed.
Yes, yes,
the
sir,
older
yes.
As a
people,
parent has changed.
Yes, yes, as a parent you have changed. I have one question, sir, from the environmental point of view. Policies are there, and I think everybody, whosoever is at the helm of affairs, they do their little bit. But Vyavasa, unfortunately, we have the people like like what we saw in 2014. That was the result of the bad planning also.
Unplanned.
Unplanned the structures being raised all over the world. And look, I, as a common citizen, we fail to raise the voice against it. We are being told the land mafia is there, and where we are heading. I know, Alhamdulillah, we have the capable engineers are there, the big good bureaucrats are there who want that our society should not face these unprecedented situations. But don't you feel we are helpless?
I did touch that what is building permissions are issued. That is the right time when we should see whether they have, if it is an institution, whether they have a master plan, keeping in view present construction, future construction, and then environment friendly development. But unfortunately, we have on papers,
Yes.
this is, for example, we give in seismic zone 5, where we can expect strong earthquakes.
Yes.
Then this is one of the requirements to make sure that there are seismic measures in the building, and they apply for permission. Nobody sees that.
We understand. We are like
So
at a
at the end of,
grassroots level.
yeah, at the end of the day, we keep on constructing unsafe houses.
Unsafe house.
So let us hope that
And say the reason is our water bodies are
otherwise,
polluted. Everything is
2005 earthquake, we can expect such an earthquake here. So I'm sure more than 80% of our buildings, especially private buildings, they are not safe. And then school board education, they have considered it one of the requirements. That these private schools, they need some certificate from competent engineers that their buildings are safe. But there is no such requirement for government buildings, and government school buildings are unsafe. They are least bothered about the kids who are studying in government school. So if they have a policy, it should be uniform, not only for private schools to get that certificate.
for everybody. For every
So health centers are more essential because at the time of earthquake, we have to take injured people to hospital. So if hospitals collapse due to earthquake, then where to take the injured people? So unfortunately, blame goes to administration.
We all, everybody has to play its own role, but
They are at a helm of affairs.
Yeah.
They can control it.
yes, they can control, but unfortunately, that's the point.
Yes, before we conclude, if I was a student of environmental science this time, I want to ask you one question that I've known from your presentation that environmental impact assessment is there and it is going to be the trend of the future. So, as an environmental student, how do I become an environmental impact assessor? Is there any central agency through which qualification of it will guarantee me a job or something like that, or do I have to put up a private venture?
See, again, if we have government policy that we should see whether our future construction is environment friendly, then they should employ them.
Do we have that?
But unfortunately, why is that?
Well,
No, we have.
No, we have,
We have.
I like that.
yes.
Environmental.
I like to add to it. Basically, these environmental consultancies, as per the notification of the Ministry of Environment and Forest, they can employ any independent consultancy which is a registered consultancy or a consultancy that is operating in a university or a recognized institution of the government. So, all the impact assessment projects like UDI and then Nemo Basgo and all other upcoming projects, including Mughal Road. They were taken up by the University of Kashmir, the Department of Environmental Sciences and Center of Research for Development for impact assessment. So if we have the infrastructure and the capabilities, and it is not just a student of environmental science who will be doing this environmental impact assessment. Environmental impact assessment is actually a multidisciplinary consultancy in which there are people from all subjects, including social sciences as well. So every expert takes his or her own area of expertise, and then they compile the reports, and then they come up with a comprehensive report, which is known as an environmental impact statement, right? So it is not just the domain of the environmental science, but yes, you have to have a good number of expertise in environmental sciences who can deal with those multidisciplinary aspects. So University of Kashmir has already been doing it since the year 2000, or maybe more than that. So you don't need to have any special qualifications for that.
And I remember I'm one of the members of Building Works Committee of Central University. Though it is not coming up yet, but they have one environmental engineer there who was actually looking at technical aspects. But unfortunately, they have some problem with land which is not suitable for construction purpose. That is why it is getting delayed, and they have hired buildings in most of the areas, even Rangam, they had one hotel there. So they are still scattered. Central University is still not coming up as a campus.
Because of land policy.
So the session stands.
Now the next speaker.
Yes.
So,
Thank you.
wait a second. So Dr. Ashit, the Department of Psychiatry, is the second speaker, but he's on his way. It will take him another 5 minutes. Dr. Salim, Mohammad Salim Khan, who's the head Department of SPM, is already with us. Please come to the podium, sir.
For nice presentation. Thank you.
So we already have a speaker with us, but we'll wait for Dr. Ashit because Dr. Salim wants Dr. Ashit to speak first. So he also wants to be a listener for his lecture. So we will take a pause till then. You can enjoy your tea.
Shahid,
Yes, sir.
that's not really Shahid.
Fahima?
So our next speaker is kindly Dr. Arshad Hussain. He is Professor, Department of Psychiatry, Government Medical College, Srinagar. He is an research expert on mood disorders, bipolar disorders, emotional trauma, and stress. He has keen interest in biological psychiatry and neuropsychiatry. He is the member of Association of Private Psychiatry, Jammu and Kashmir. So he is invited here for his specialist talk today.
My apologies first. I'm extremely sorry that I'm late by a few minutes. What generally happens with us is that when we enter hospital, it's up to us. But when we leave the hospital, it's not up to us. So the patients dictate and other circumstances. I'm so sorry that I got late and I kept you waiting. Uh, I understand that we are talking about science and we are talking about empowerment of women. Two very important topics interlinked with each other. And for me, both of them are very, very important. And in terms of being a mental health expert, they're even more important. While probably the topic written for me is women and mental health, I'll try to actually deliberate it on that women and mental health and women in mental health. Because I think both of them are very important in terms of what we are talking, that means science and empowerment. All of us know, many of us talk about it, that women seem to have more vulnerabilities on mental health than men. There have been scientific discussions, debates about it, there have been researches about it. And one of the most commonest illnesses or commonest vulnerabilities in women was thought to be the mood illnesses, as people know of depression. If you could please stop the side talks. If we could serve this tea later on, please. It disturbs me. So one of the vulnerabilities which has been researched, which has been talked about, is vulnerabilities in terms of mood in women. And when I say vulnerabilities, I said that not long back, people thought that depression is an illness of women only, and men were thought to be, a very small proportion of patients. And then came time that we still understand that there are vulnerabilities in women, and depression still seems to be very common, anxieties still seem to be very common in women, but obviously men are catching up. They don't want to be left out in anything, and the stats now seem to be much closer than ever were. At one point of time, the ratios were like 3:1, and now the ratios are as close to 2:1. So for every two depressed women, you have one depressed man. And these vulnerabilities, researched and found, were thought to be more of biological. And biological in the sense that while men, in terms of hormonal and in terms of neurodevelopment, seem to remain static after they achieve adolescence, women were thought to change every day, every week, every month, every year, and year by year in terms of their biology. And that biology had effects on the neuronal plasticity, neuronal synthesis, and other neuronal processes. And that was thought to be an established vulnerability in females till very recently. Still, most of the books actually will talk about women's vulnerability about these mental health issues because of this pathway. And then came this landmark study by WHO. We said that if you take away inequality, and I stress, if you take away inequality, poverty, and domestic violence from women's life, the biological vulnerabilities seem to come down to as close to 1 to 1.2. While we were talking about biological vulnerabilities of 1:3, they come as close to 1:2. And this was a landmark WHO study. I do not remember the journal this time, but that actually told us the manipulation of environmental factors, in interacting with the biological vulnerabilities and in resulting into the mental health vulnerabilities which we usually talk about. And why is mental health important in terms of what you are talking these days? These 2-3 days when you will have this Congress. Mental health becomes a major impediment in empowerment. if we have to think of empowerment of women, I know that the education is a known pathway, and for education you need to be healthy. For any other accomplishments, you need to be healthy. While we understand health as important to empowerment, we generally think of physical health. And when you think of physical health, if you think of modern world, physical health or physical disabilities still might be small disabilities in empowerment, might be, but do not play the role as mental health disabilities or mental health vulnerabilities do in disempowerment. And case in point, as all of you might be knowing, Stephen Hawkins and many, many other people who you think have, I went to the extreme case, but you might think many people have disabilities of the world which was physical, where you needed 2 arms, 2 legs, and all physical parameters to be at optimal to achieve in the world. But in this modern world, if you want to achieve, if you want to empower society or culture, you need one thing to be at optimal. You need only one thing to be at optimal, and that is the brain. If the brain is at optimal functioning, nothing stops you. And that's how this is linked. One, that I told you, the factors in the society, in the cultures, in the families of domestic violence, inequality, poverty, which are impediments to the women empowerment as such. And then those interacting with the biology of women and creating further deterrents to the empowerment of women. And that's why it's very important to actually address the mental health in women. That's why it's very important to recognize the mental health vulnerabilities. This is something which everybody knows. This is something which is talked about. If you even Google women and mental health, you will find such sort of literature coming out. But what's less talked about is the resilience, the coping of women, the strength of their mental health. Over these years, 20 years now, I have been in this field. While I have seen lots of vulnerabilities, while I have been part of lots of stories of vulnerabilities of women in terms of mental health, but I tell you that there have been more stories of resilience and coping of women than have been of scamming, than have been of the mental health. I'm remembered of many women, and this example comes to me because probably Dr. Salim is here. He also knows that this person. He might not be knowing the actual story. This woman I saw in 2000, 2001, and his husband had died, and because of that, obviously that the kind of society we are. Once the husband died, so she had to move to the in-laws did not cooperate and all other things, and she had 4 kids to take care of. And one of those kids, because of the situations they were living in, poverty, all things, as I said, poverty, inequality, developed some sort of issues, and they came to our department. My touch with that family started with that. Obviously, all the vulnerabilities. But when I look back now, 20 years from now, you know, and when I think of empowerment, all those four kids are educated, doing wonderfully well in their lives. One of them is a doctor because that's what remembered me about this woman. Three others are also doing fine. And I don't think that I'm not somebody who thinks that doctor is the only achievement in the world. Just to say, because in our culture, there are lots of there are lots of other uh, parameters as well. But usually, mothers, parents have this uh, deep inside them that they want to make their kids into doctors. And being in such a vulnerable position socially, economically, she still strived. And through education, while you could see, if you look at this empowerment, you might look empowerment of four men, four males, four males. They are empowered. But for me, as a mental health professional, I tell you that the most empowered is, and the story of resilience and coping is that woman. Those four men are at that place, at that point, just because of the resilience and coping. How she fought her biology. You could understand, I told you at beginning that there are biological vulnerabilities. There are biological vulnerabilities. And then there were environmental factors, both interacting with each other in her case. But what did that bring about? That brought about change in her. The change of playing this role of resilience and coping and empowering her own kids to this level. This might, be not a big story. If all of you look in your mohlas, in your communities, you'll find hundreds of these stories. While we as mental health professionals many times look at the women who come to us with anxiety, depression, and other things, we many times forget these stories of resilience and coping of women. If men had to play the roles which the females have to play in cultures like ours, I tell you that whole biology would have been reversed. As I'm today telling you that depression, anxiety seem to be more common in females. Look at the roles. Getting up in the morning, and I tell you this is a story of every home, including mine. Getting up in the morning, preparing kids for school, then preparing herself, going for job, doing that job, coming back, becoming doing house chores, and then a wife as well. 24 into 7. 24 into 7 playing multiple roles. While men are fathers, husbands, woman continues to be daughter, daughter-in-law, mother, mother-in-law, sister, sister-in-law. And she has to continuously play these multiple roles. And with these multiple roles, she also has to play the roles of the modern world, which the modern world has now put her on. Hence, limiting empowerment to only educated women might not be uh, pertinent. What is more pertinent probably is that women's empowerment in terms of their mental health resilience and coping, wherein they not only empower themselves, but they're responsible for empowerment of almost whole culture, whole society. And this is women in mental health. I don't think I'll go beyond this. And I'll have this small 2-3 minutes on women in mental health. And when I say women in mental health, because I come from mental health background, at one point of time, people will tell us, we do not have a female psychiatrist or a female clinical psychologist in Kashmir. It was all male-dominated world. While the patient population was coming from one gender, but the carers were from other gender. In spite of the fact that might be very relevant to you, that my department of psychiatry, the first head of department was a female. Many people might not be knowing here. My first head of department was a female. Her name was Erina Hall. She was a civil psychiatrist who had come from that Switzerland to India and then to Kashmir, and she's the one who founded the first modern psychiatry department in Kashmir. But then, when she left, things did not go that way. There were not many females, but we are lucky. If you come to my department these days, you will see it looks like women's college. When I'm in teaching my PGs, I have to ask for the male PG to come in because otherwise it looks all female. There are many females which have come in as young scholars, researchers, clinical psychologists, psychiatrists, empowered, highly influential, highly intelligent. And what have they brought to the psychiatry? What have they brought to the mental health? That's what I said in Women's Mental Health. They brought to mental health the kind of empathy which was lacking. The kind of empathy women have in their brains is immense. Now, in spite of whatever they are going through, the way they care for the patients is immense. It's just not possible for men to actually connect that way, be empathetic that way, be sympathetic. How careful they are about their patients, how careful they are about the learning. I tell you, and with this I will conclude, and I'll be free for interaction after that. Is that we had two examiners recently from AIMS and PGI, and we had 8 postgraduates who had to appear in MD exam, and out of them, 6 were females. And because people who come from outside to Kashmir come with the prism, they what they have heard and they had only come second time. 3 days after this, they were so amazed by the kind of interactions they had, these PG students, PG scholars, these girls, about wide areas of one, that mental health, then wide areas of life. Beyond that, what are their goals? What do they want to achieve? They were just stunned that girls from so-called, quote unquote, conservative societies would actually think this big in life. My best wishes to this conference, and we all pray to the God that we have women which are empowered and which are deep rooted in science. That will bring a change in culture which will be irreversible, inshallah, and we will really make it great then. That will be the time when we will be a great culture. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Arshid, for this proficient talk on women and mental health. It has revamped our consciousness about the mental health vulnerability and how each women are empowered with resilience. And now the session is open for question answers. If there is anyone from the students.
Thank you for such a beautiful talk, which was away from science and technology and was focused on one of the powerful creatures that Allah has created. That is the woman. Uh, there are two things I want to ask. One is that you said that the woman has to move up in the modern society and play the role of the modern woman. Actually, I, as a woman, representing one type of the class of women who go out fearlessly, but at the end of the day, I would like to tell you that we have a lot of fears inside. And when we talk about mental health, the women in this region really don't know, when you talk about feeling low, and there's a difference between feeling low and feeling abnormal. Like, When is it the time to talk to a friend and the time to talk to a psychiatrist? The time to talk to a counselor. We are not able to differentiate that, really. And even if we are feeling low, most of the people around us make us feel that we do have a problem, like we are facing a problem because so many people are talking about mental health issues these days. And even feeling low for a moment feels like that we need a counselor and we need some help. So this difference needs to be carved out and told to the women, particularly in this region, that what is normal when you are feeling low and what actually is the time when you should consult a counselor. And the second thing is that I'm not able to understand why women need to be empowered. Like, I have not been able to understand, although I'm conducting this program on science and technology, sustainable development, with women empowerment. As I go back in history, I see that women have always been playing this powerful role. And if there is no women at the back, like a mother in the house, a sister-in-law in the house, a sister in the house, then we won't be, even I as a girl, won't be able to come out and work throughout the day. So one, they are backing all the technology and all the science that's being invented and discovered and generated. So I really don't know like what this environment is all about. So I wish somebody talks about it. Although there are men who are lagging behind these days, many of the men are lagging behind. So there should be a conference equally on men empowerment and women empowerment, where in many divisions, like if I talk about environmental sciences, there are more girls coming up in the merit list. And yes, it's been said that girls are hardworking, not intelligent. But I found them brilliant as per the extensions of my mind. So I would like to ask the members of the podium that why women empowerment with the women is already empowered in my opinion.
Thank you for these wonderful comments. I'll start at the last. Women have always been empowered, and I believe in that. But that empowerment has not been recognized. Probably when we actually talk these days at those conferences, I talk about it's in probably the part have recognition of those empowerments. Now, as I told you a story of a female who, in other words, might not be thought to be empowered. Simple fact, woman from a village who actually does this miraculous thing. She's and you have hundreds of such stories of resilience. Only thing is probably we need to recognize that empowerment. And going back to the first part is that when is the time to talk to a friend? There's always time to talk to a friend. Please do that regularly. Talk to your friends regularly about your day-to-day stresses, about what you are doing, what is happening in your life. Keep on talking. Talking is something which is so wonderful. It has power to take away from you. When you give it, it just lessens the pain. The talking has that power to do that. And there's always a day, time, minute, or to talk to a friend. When do you talk to a professional? Before that, presence of, as you said, that women have lots of fear. Absence of fear is a disease. Absence of fear is a disease. Fear is integral to human existence. If you do not fear anything, look at yourself. There might be some issue.
You need a counselor.
What is important is you have to have your fear. We encounter them. We see them head on and pass through them. That's what's important. And I'll tell you how. Children have fear of what in the childhood look fear. So when they're going for bathing, so they'll start crying. We keep on bathing. So the fear is there, but we keep on, and the fear is extinguished. So the presence of fear in human beings is a very, very normal thing. But only thing is that we encounter those fears which are irrational, illogical, and fear is very innate to human beings and should be there. Now, I've said this many times, and I say it again because we're living in a pandemic, probably it's very appropriate to that, that presence of fear in humans as a civilization is responsible for our existence on this earth. There are more powerful organisms on this earth, like dinosaurs. They are extinct, probably because they did not fear. We feared and we did things for our survival, which were scientific, which were rational, logical at that point of time. And that's why we are still existing on the earth, and they are not. Presence of fear per se is not abnormal. So we all have our fears and we all have to encounter them on a day-to-day basis. When do we talk to professionals? The last one. When you think that your sadness, your fears are overcoming you, they're not letting you function as a normal human being. Probably that's the time. If it's a very simplistic answer, I understand, but probably that's the time to talk to a professional. Till then, you can say tata bye bye and keep on talking to your friends.
Wonderful.
And as you said, I knew that this is a science congress, and I had this idea first of talking about our research in this conference, and thought of that idea when Malaji actually talked to me and said that. But then, when I saw that the topic was about women empowerment, I thought that if we lots of science talk, and if we link the two, that will be better, and that too to the mental health present. That's why I actually modified my talk to this one. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other question? Do you have another mic?
Assalamualaikum, sir. First of all, I'm happy to extend my thanks to Dr. Ashad, who has rendered selfless service to our society in the past few years, more than I know exactly how many years, but counting them. And particularly during the pandemic, so you were just a phone call away from our brothers and sisters who were suffering from this unfortunate mental disease. Thank you very much, sir. My question is, like being in the system, I am in touch with many such ladies who are suffering, I can say, the domestic violence. On one hand, they're doing tremendous job at their workplaces and looking at their parenting brought up. They have been groomed very well. They have been taught not to be don't argue much. And the thing is, like the intellectual class, I can say, they belong to the intellectual class. They are suffering so badly. And I can feel our society's system is rotten. Yes. Like, how we are going. And for example, if there is a problem in my family, and I have a sister, cousin sister. Say, Ishmana, your dog. It's the problem, it's their problem. It's not your problem. You will be, like, if I talk, I'm outlaw. And I feel restless. I say, why we are not talking? At least physically, you are wrong. But everybody is just thinking, no, your relation will get derailed with that family. Don't talk. How we are going to set the system right? I can feel the pain in your heart. I feel the pain for my sister. But I think things are not going in a right direction. What we should do as a common citizen, as a responsible citizen, I think there is something has to be done. We feel कि नहीं, go to the women commission, they say no, additionally. But girls, they are suffering. They are suffering. I have three girls in front of me, very nice girls. They're not able to take care of their kids. What we should.
Very pertinent. While I see the extreme cases, I might not be, that might be the tip of the iceberg. Because once somebody comes in a mental health paradigm with issues, domestic, so it's usually at an extreme, and there might be many things happening within the community. While we know that there is a larger legal other dance to it, but one thing which I have time and again advocated is women standing for women. Why domestic violence is happening in the homes, while it might be man who is perpetrating it, that there are 5 to 6 onlookers in, or even sometimes who actually are being part of this perpetration, which are female. So probably because they are there, he might be son, brother, or they are the ones who would actually stop this. Because who will understand this woman better than him? What I usually feel, because I understand that there are legal parameters, people might disagree with me also, but once it goes beyond homes, it becomes even a bigger problem. In cultures like ours, where there is not that support structure, while we are talking of European laws, we have imported them directly, but there is not built that infrastructure. For example, look at this, that my therapist who works with me, she finds a woman who has a domestic violence. She advises her, see, this is, well, this is illegal, you go somewhere. Why does she go? Wherever this lady goes, she goes into further vicious circle of abuse. She goes into culture where the patriarchal society starts looking down on her. And she becomes part, she systematically gets abused physically, verbally, behind back, and it is very difficult. That's why for that, before we actually have that kind of infrastructure, that kind of sensitivity in mass society about this issue, we probably need to bring in change within the family. The women which are onlookers of this violence, they should not be onlookers. They should be actively defending this girl. The mistake could be the problem might stem out from but then violence is something which is not acceptable. It should not be acceptable at any time. So that's why the dialogue should be, that's why the probably the seniors, which essay are so quote unquote onlookers should come.
Thank you. So I would like to add to it because looking at like all the years I have lived as a girl, the thing is that you have to teach your girls, your daughters, your sisters that there is a horse she can ride, there is a boat she can sail, and there is a pen that she can ride. The thing is that many a times living in this kind of a society which have more of patriarchy, I have been saved at times when there was not a boat. Genuinely. So we need to believe in that small word which was taught to us in our childhood that uh, capabilities with men and women are equal. There are differences which have been there because the Creator has kept them and we should respect them. But at the same time, there is no difference in the capabilities. While men have their own unique capabilities, women have their own unique capabilities, and they can excel with their capabilities in their own in all the fields they are put in. So the first thing that we lack in this society is that our daughters don't believe. Well, exceptions are not counted. Our sisters don't believe in themselves, and they don't have to be like each other since we carry a very unique signature. So, while uh, keeping connected to our own principles and morals and values, we are all excellent as humans, then as men, and as thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Arshad, for this wonderful talk. I'd just like to conclude in one of my favorite quotes that it's not important to be strong. What is important is to feel strong. Nobody can give you the power. You have to give you the power yourself. And nobody can limit you. Only you can limit yourself from whatever endeavors you are going to take or make. And whatever happens in the whole world happens twice. First, it actually happens in your brain. That's where the mental health portion comes out. And then actually you translate that brain idea, that mental energy you have into your actions and therefrom into your life. So you have all the power, and I hope this powerful presentation has concluded now. So we can move on to the next speaker. Our next speaker for this session is Dr. Mohammed Salim. He is the head department of social and preventive medicines, Government Medical College, Srinagar. So invited for the talk here.
Assalamu alaikum. It's very difficult to talk about what Dr. Arshid has been talking, so I have to shift to a totally different scenario now. So, at the onset, I thank the organizers for inviting me. Respected Principal, SP College, an iconic institution. Uh, it's a nostalgic for me. Maybe many of you were not born that time when I entered this institution for a year or so before I joined GMC after passing my 12th. And I thank Dr. Humaira and other colleagues. So I will be talking about the seroprevalence of SARS-CoV-2 infection, that is COVID, in Kashmir. So why, when we look at you, almost 70-80% are still using masks. Why do we wear masks? So what is the requirement to wear a mask? Okay. Before that, how many among you have received vaccines? Not many hands from the female sides, still less hands. Why reason? Still, you are still believing in myths that is causes some problems. So that is the reason. So we need to empower women in that aspect also. So we need to act upon those myths and try to remove those myths that it causes some sort of infertility or some other issues. So kindly get vaccinated, and I'm just trying to show why vaccination is important. So before I move to my presentation, I will just take our journey into this presentation, into this serosurveillance. So serosurveillance means we are basically taking blood samples and trying to find out the antibodies against a particular infection. So that is seroprevalence. And for this, we also did seroprevalence for SARS-CoV-2 infection, that is COVID infection. And it all started last year in the month of May when we received a phone call from Indian Council of Medical Research, National Institute of Epidemiology at Chennai, that they are conducting a nationwide study. Over 70 sites are being participating in that, and in J&K they don't have a site, they don't have a ICM institute here. So they approached us and we agreed for that. And they conducted the first round in Pulwama. Every state had a district or so. So in our district, we had the Pulwama and we did the survey there. And if you look at, it was just 2%. So only 2% of our community had and developed antibodies. So 98% of our community was vulnerable to the infection last year in the month of May and June. So it was very imperative that time that we need to follow the COVID appropriate behavior. Then a couple of months later, and this thing got published in a very good journal. Then in another 2 months, another round was carried out, where the prevalence jumped to 27.3% in Pulwama, from just 2% to 27%. That means lot many people got infected in those 2 months. And you can see later on, and again it got published in a very good journal in the Lancet. In the third round in December and Jan, 4 months later, it had gone to 31%. So more and more people were infected. And lastly, now, what we saw now, that 61% people showed antibodies during this year, June. So that means the COVID infection has been quite prevalent, quite widespread, and because majority of us didn't follow the COVID appropriate behavior. Another good thing about this round is that many people got vaccinated that time. So this was how vaccinated helped to build up our immunity. And once you see that around 80, above 80% of healthcare providers among the sample also had developed antibodies because they received vaccination quite early in January itself. So this is how vaccination helped us. So you can see 56% of our population had developed antibodies. So every second person was having antibodies against COVID that time. We also did some studies of our own Kashmir division in Srinagar also. So we started with our first survey in in June last year itself, and we just found among the health workers it was just 2.5. So in the common general population in Pulwama it was just 2%, but health workers 1 month later after that study we found it was 2.5%. And then we did a survey in the general population in Srinagar district. We showed that 3.6% were having antibodies. The reason being that in healthcare providers, because of following the COVID appropriate behavior, they were using the PPE kits, all those things, and that's why they had less prevalence. So from that 3.1% in July, it jumped to 40% in October. So in just August, September, October, in 3 months, the prevalence jumped up to 40%. So, lot many people were not following the COVID appropriate behavior. They were thinking that is, इसमें कोई चाल है or something were there. So, a lot of people got infected during that time, and many more. And at that time, the virus was quite in the first phase, first wave. What we saw that time, lot many people got infected. Later on, what we found later, we did a study across all Kashmir districts, all the 10 districts, and we found that 37% of all population in that sample were having antibodies. So the number of cases were rising, so was it. So we concluded that 37% of individuals aged 18 years and above had developed antibodies. The infection rate was not that much with regard to their fatality, but still not many people were getting infected. And we also thought that people are not following COVID appropriate behavior. So let's move to our this presentation. So we conducted a study in July this year only, the another round across all 10 districts of Kashmir Valley. And I'm just showing it's how we carried out and what were the results. So the presence of SARS-CoV-2 specific antibodies provides evidence of recent infection. In this study, what we did, if you many of you might be aware about the antibodies. So we have 5 types of antibodies. So we have IgG, A, M, D, and E. So once a person gets infected, he develops IgM. IgM means recent infection. So we try to elicit the IgM. Then we had 2 types of IgGs. So qualitative and quantitative. And that's why our study is one of the unique studies globally that we have done that type of things. And another thing that what we found that many asymptomatic cases were not reported and missed. Even as on date, today, we have a lot of cases coming up, but they are not reporting to the system. And one thing that is happening nowadays is a breakthrough infection. Breakthrough infection means people who have got vaccinated, get COVID, and are presenting symptomatically. And many families are, as on date, having those things because they didn't follow. So we found that many people in Kashmir were not were asymptomatic. Around 80 to 90% of people in the who got infection doesn't present with symptoms. So they what happens? They get an infection, they move to their families, they move around, they infect others, and that's why we have so many. So our aim and objectives of the study was it was undertaken to estimate the prevalence of IgG and IgM antibodies against SARS-CoV infection among the adult population of Kashmir, and secondly, to find out the demographic correlates of this infection. So we took a sample size based on the anticipated prevalence. As I said, in our previous study, we found that 37% of our population had antibodies. So we took a seroprevalence of 40% based on that, and we used the absolute error of 2%, design effect 1.5% because it's a cluster sampling with a non-response rate of 10%. So the sample size came to 4,000. So in 10 districts, we took 400 per district. Same way, we took a sample among healthcare providers and security forces also, where we took 1,000 samples, 100 per district, and we also took pregnant women. So one thing about this study was that all our previous studies were among adults. So this study we carried out in children also of age 7 and above years. So we went to enrolling healthcare providers, police personnel, pregnant women. So we went into the communities, did the survey, carried the data. So without taking much, I will just move to the results. So among the general population, what we found that as on date, in July itself, 84% of our population had shown antibodies. You can see the rise from just 40% to 84%. That means almost everyone among us was having antibodies. Either it was because of the infection or because of the vaccines. Then, age-wise, once we look at, as we know, if you look at the first row, it's under 18 years. So, because this age group hasn't received vaccines till date, still, but 78% of that population, under 18 children, whom we were worried about, had already developed antibodies. That means they have already got infected. And this is because of the widespread prevalence of infection within the community and within the families itself. Then once we look into the gender distribution, we see more females have got infected and have developed antibodies than the males. With regard to the vaccination status, those who haven't received vaccines, 81% among them have developed antibodies, while as those who have received vaccines, 89% have. So vaccination definitely had a role. Around 9% more people have developed antibodies because of vaccination. While moving into the pregnant woman, during the time of study, hardly any pregnant woman received vaccines. But once we look, around 79% of pregnant women had developed antibodies. They haven't received any vaccines. This again shows that the infection was quite common, quite widespread. And most of the time, you see pregnant woman doesn't move out of their houses, especially in the later months of pregnancy. And it's because of the men and other people in the family who move around, or the children who move around and bring infection to the families. Last year, we saw many women dying of COVID in the first wave, but alhamdulillah, later on, we didn't see that much mortality. Then moving to the police personnel, it was very much surprising that 95.5% of all police personnel sampled showed antibodies. The reason is that every police person whom we sampled had taken vaccine. So this also is a good indicator that people should take vaccination as early as possible to get good immune response. Again, among the healthcare providers, we saw over 91%, 92% of all healthcare providers have developed antibodies. The reason being, again, that first thing, they were many of them might be exposed, but